Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Golf on Tap. As you can see, we have a little bit different lineup this week with Jack out on vacation. We are joined making his Golf on Tap debut, the founder of On Tap Sportsnet, Tony Marchese. Tony, how are you doing today?
What's going on, Ross? Happy to be here. Happy to be making my Golf on Tap debut. We'll christen it. We'll crack them. We got a new intro. There's some show news. Find this now in podcast form. It's a good day here at Golf on Tap. I'm happy to be in Jack's spot. I will preface, I am nowhere near the golf knowledge book that Jack Bushman is. So I hope I make him proud. We're going to have some fun. There's probably going to be a lot of drinking, and it's just going to be like a normal golf round for me. But Ross, I'm really happy to be on these airwaves with you, talking some PGA Tour, and we've got a ton of stuff to talk about today. How are you, my friend?
I am, first of all, thrilled to actually be able to do a show with you and have you be a guest on our show. Like I said earlier, thank you for filling in for Jack. But like you said, we had a wild day today. You and I already kind of drew up a plan of how we were going to do this episode, and news just kept dropping all day in the golf world. So we have a loaded episode now. And one of the first things to really talk about is it continued again this past weekend on the PGA Tour. We got another long shot coming up and taking the event from the normal guys.
That we did. Very unexpected. I sort of told you this before we hopped on here, but this was a weird event, at least for me watching this. I'm new to watching golf. I'll be completely honest. I've been doing it now for about maybe a year and a half, 2 years, but the Golf Channel's always on. I'm getting really into these events, and we just keep seeing guys come out of absolutely nowhere. On Sunday, well, this week, Saturday, we'll get into that in a second because I've got some questions for you in terms of the alternate schedule that we had this past weekend. And I'm just curious how you felt about it. It really threw my week off. The whole entire thing was just, I didn't know what day it was this weekend. And it just, I didn't like it. But man. How did this happen again? Once again, we've got another name that comes out of the woodwork and winds up your winner on Saturday. I've got to correct myself. I'm going to say Sunday at some point, but how did this happen again, Ross?
So the first thing is I've seen so many posts that people have been putting out like this isn't the same PGA field. We're missing players, blah, blah, blah. But realistically, we're not. I mean, we had Tommy Fleetwood and Rory McIlroy were over on the DP Tour again, but those are some big events for them yearly and like sponsorship things they have to do. Really, we had a lot of the best players were in this field again. It's just the young guys are not your traditional young guys coming up on tour right now. They are coming up from the Korn Ferry Tour, or they're qualifying their way on the tour, playing the DP World Tour, PGA Europe. And they're bringing their game with them, and their game is top tier already. We're not seeing that typical developmental cycle where someone has to grind it out for like 3-4 years on tour before they get some real success. They're being coached and taught that when they graduate from these lower tiers and they come up, their game is there. Their game can hold up, and it proved it this weekend. I think you and I talked about, if you looked at the leaderboard, the top 10, 8 out of like the 10 are either fresh off the Korn Ferry Tour and in like their third or fourth start on tour, or they've been on the PGA for like 2 or 3 years and haven't really had a lot of success. But now these past several weeks, they've been up there, and you can see that turn, which is the case with our winner, Matthew Pavon. Matthew Pavon has only played in 11 events. He was on the DP World Tour last year. This is only the third event with him having a official tour card. He's a winner.
Ross, I'm looking at these names that you mentioned here in the leaderboard that finished it, and you can sort of name maybe 2 of them. I mean, I see Tony Finau up there finished the week at -10. And then Xander Schauffele, -9, finishes right behind him. You can make a note on Højgaard to finish in second place. I know we've got some little tidbits on that one, but talk about all these DP World Tour guys. And I'm just curious from a golf fan perspective. I love watching the DP World Tour, like late night golf. Just it's beautiful. You get to see other parts of the world, some beautiful golf courses out there. I love the DP World Tour, but I'm not exactly like tuned into what's actually happening. It's more or less just like, wow, that course looks really cool. I'd like to play there someday. It's, somewhere in South Africa or something, somewhere you're never probably going to get the chance to go to. So it's nice to see these things. But you mentioned guys coming over here and succeeding in the PGA Tour. Do you attribute that? And I'm sure some of the comments you're talking about, it's not your same PGA Tour field. Is that just the easy, live golf stole some of these guys, so it's not your same field? Is that the comment sort of that you're going after, maybe beating around the bush with?
I think that's definitely part of it. I think people just don't realize that until we get the merger of everything, it's gonna be different. But you can't count out and say like that leaderboard was shit at the end of the day. There are new players on tour. They are showing up and they are ready to compete. Their game is already there. They're grinding it. They're grinding it out on the lower tours. What a lot of people don't understand when people make this jump from like Korn Ferry or DP is the reason they don't have success on PGA isn't because they're good players. It's because they run out of money.
That's an excellent point. You talk about, how hard it is to get there just in and of itself. You got sponsorship. There's tons of things that we can go into. You bring up a really excellent point with they run out of money. So I'm looking at this leaderboard here. What did you see out of Pavan's round? What brought him to the ultimate prize here, getting his first tour win?
So I actually had a conversation with Jack about 2 weeks ago that if you go back and you just look at the past couple tournaments, Matthew Pavan has been hanging around just kind of in the shadows. They not getting a lot of coverage, anything, but when they're flashing up the board and they're showing the names, he's caught my eye as one of the lone French players on the tour. So you see the little flag next to the name, everything, it stands out. And he's just been in that 5 to 15 range for like the past 3 tournaments before this. And, he just got his tour card officially to come over and do this. And he was just a guy I had my eye on that I was like, oh, well, for someone making the most of their initial opportunities with the limited opportunities they have, he's putting it together. He's making himself some money. And then this week, Wednesday to Saturday, his name just kind of stayed right in that 4-5 range. And so the biggest thing I'm going to lead to is consistency. The consistency was just there and impressive. That is the name of the game. You just have to put together consistent rounds. And then if you watch, what really stood out to me is the back nine was really eating people up. People were going low on the front nine. They make the turn, and the back nine is you're seeing doubles everywhere from players struggling. His front nine, he shot 3 under. His back nine, he shot even. And the name of the game in this, again, consistency. He got himself to the top of the board. Aside from the little blunder, on 17, pulling the putt, obviously nerves, just overthought it. It was very clear with that putt for the lone bogey he had on the back. Was up until then, he had parred every hole out. And he was just staying put. At one point, he had a 3-shot lead. He was making people come catch him. I'm not going to do anything crazy. I'm not going to go too far outside of my rhythm. I'm just going to get up and down, move to the next hole, and make people come catch me.
Yeah, in this tournament, Ross, we had a couple of really interesting things happen, and you made note of this very early on, and it was widely talked about. The differences between the North and the South course in terms of scoring. And I want you to comment on that in just a minute. But as we sort of just wrap a bow around Pavard winning this one. Did you get nervous on 18 when he hit that tee shot into the bunker? And he didn't exactly have the greatest out of the bunker. I think that was a pitching wedge he went to. Ball did not go very far, put himself in sort of a troubling position there in the rough, had to go over the water, landed on the green. I think he probably had maybe his shot of the tournament there. I think that's probably arguably one of the most impressive things I saw this weekend, because as soon as he comes out of that bunker, I was this has bogey, double bogey written all over it. If you make one small minor miscue coming out of that rough there, because you're in the water, or you're overshooting the green potentially if you club up too far. I thought he handled that impressively, but were you worried when he came out of that bunker as much as I was?
So when they made that turn, you knew with like Højgaard and Jaeger that they were going to try to bomb the ball, get it as far down there on that par 5 where they could be on the green into. And at that point, you're just thinking, if you're Pavon, you're just trying to hold. You have a 1-shot lead. The absolute worst is maybe you par this hole, and realistically at the time, only Højgaard had a good chance to catch him. And you think, well, if Højgaard knocks down a birdie, we're gonna go play, a playoff. That's fine. They bomb the ball off the tee, and then Pavon goes in the bunker, and I go, all right, well, not ideal, but we can hit a nice little layup here. The only thing you can't do is miss the fairway with this punch out. And the second he hit it, I don't know if you were listening to the commentating team, but the second he hit it, they're like, he can do basically anything but do that. And it just disappeared in that rough. And they're just like, yep, that was literally the one thing he couldn't do there. And then he somehow, nerves of steel, after pulling the putt on 17, where you could see he's nervous, out of nowhere, he pulls out another wedge and nails that thing to 7.5 feet for a birdie.
I was amazed. I was quite amazed with that, because this is now the second week in a row where you've got a first-time winner on tour coming down to that last hole where they had some miscues getting to the green. And think back last week, Dunlap put himself in a very precarious situation. And I thought, here we go again. But this time I had zero faith that he was going to be able to close the deal on that. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was the difference in scoring. You brought this up a couple of times over the past weekend, the differences between scoring on North and South. What did you see there? Because the discrepancies were somewhat alarming.
Yeah, to be honest, it wasn't even freaking close. I believe the last stat I saw, the scoring on the North course was like 133 under par. The scoring on the South course was like 3 over.
That's wild to me. Just absolutely wild. Then again, two completely different courses here, Ross, but did you think that there was any benefit to days in which guys played, North versus South, or was this more or less in your mind just going to be, you run up your score on your day on the North course here?
This really came down to if you took advantage of your 18 on the North course. When you got there, if you were able to take advantage of it. I think the perfect example that I saw was obviously on Blockhead, Michael Block, getting to like 5 under, and then getting to like 5 under and playing the South course, sitting at 5 under, gets through the first 9, makes the turn. Michael Block finished the round at 1 over.
I know you're a huge Michael Block guy. I didn't really follow much of his rounds. I'm just looking at Pavon here as we come back to it. But
it's more just how much that South course ate people alive. Where Michael Block took advantage of playing the North Course, got himself to like 5 under, played really well on the South Course till the turn, and then shoots 6 over on the back 9 and misses the cut outright.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
That's just rough. That's just absolutely rough.
Eating people, but it was a perfect example of just how it was eating people alive. And it was not a surprise if you go back and look at the guys that were at the top of the leaderboard, how low they went when they played the North Course. That's where they got a lot of their steam, and they were able to work their way up the board. And then they just played consistent the last couple of days to end when playing the South Course.
Hey, take advantage of what you're given. We're going to get the same thing this week, Ross. It's going to be a little bit different. I think it's probably a good transitionary point as we talk about 2 different courses, same event, to talk a little bit about this next week's AT&T Pro-Am, Ross. We're going to Pebble Beach, Spyglass Hill, 2 very iconic golf courses. What are your thoughts here? Let's get into the AT&T, because we've got so much other in the golf world to talk about tonight here.
Yeah. So first thing is, yes, we are at Pebble Beach. They are playing 2 courses: Pebble Beach, regular Pebble Beach, and Spyglass Hill. Which, for what most people don't know, is Spyglass Hill is actually considered even tougher than Pebble. Basically, they are playing 2 of the toughest courses in the world on the same week. On separate days. Pebble Beach is most notably known for having the smallest greens in the world. I think I was reading the average size of these greens is just 3,500 square feet, and all those greens for Pebble Beach are also surrounded by 118 bunkers throughout the course. So this is, if you are not hitting straight, you are not in the fairway, you go anywhere and you miss this green, you are going to have a terrible, terrible day.
That makes for interesting things to happen throughout the weekend here. And you mentioned Spyglass Hill, obviously the tougher course of these 2. They're only going to have to play this once. You're going to see guys get very comfortable with Pebble Beach probably by around Sunday. Anybody? This is a no-cut event. We've got a stacked field, but you mentioned one thing. You're going to have to hit this ball straight. There's plenty of guys here. I'm thinking of one of them right now, who's arguably the favorite, if not the favorite in betting odds. And I've watched him play a couple rounds where he gets himself in trouble not finding the fairways. So it should be, I think, at least my hope is, it's the most entertaining golf we've seen thus far. It's going to have to top Nick Dunlap winning just 2 weeks ago. He's in the field this week. That's going to be exciting. There's Rory McIlroy. That's a guy I was alluding to just a minute ago, coming back.
It's okay. You can fangirl.
I'm going to fangirl over it. I love Rory. I love Rory. That's, I'm making that official right here on this podcast right now. Crack him. I probably will lay some money on Rory. I believe I looked at him plus 750 right now, entering the week on FanDuel. But he's not the only one who's going to be playing in his first event on the PGA Tour this season. There's a couple other guys. Ross, who else we got in this field?
We got Tommy Fleetwood's finally coming back over from DP World Tour. We're getting Victor Hovland's coming back. We're going to see Jordan Spieth. This field is limited. Where normally we see about 100, 150 players for a PGA tournament for the first couple of days. They made this select event for a signature event. There's only 80, hence there is no cut this week. Everyone's making some money.
I believe this is Fitzpatrick's first too, as well.
Yes, we're getting a lot of guys that have spent the first beginning of the season overseas playing DP because of the Dubai events and everything. The purses are big, so I get it that they want to go out there, and also sponsorship things that are required of them to play certain events. This is going to be our first full field of really seeing a true PGA Tour.
I'm excited. I don't know about you. It's sort of reminiscent to me of the FedEx Cup playoffs that we just saw last fall, or late summer, if you want to say late summer, fall ish. I know it's not fall golf, but this is probably the most excited I've been since the BMW Championship time. Just absolutely stacked field. Do you have any picks early on, Ross? I know Jack is traditionally the guy that's going to give you all of these bets. I've got my couple names that I'm going to throw out there in just a second, but I'm going to hand it over to you because you've been doing this with Jack a little bit longer than I have. And my picks, I wouldn't exactly follow or tail me as if I was Jack Bushman. I'm putting disclaimers out there. I am not a golf betting advisor. I am just here to fill in and make some picks for him. And I'm picking Rory. That's already there. Jack will not advise you to do that, I'm sure. But I'm going to go to my drawing board here. I'm going to give you your time to throw out a couple of picks here.
I do like Victor Hovland this week at plus 120. That's a fair bargain for Victor here as well. Is the only other one that really stood out in terms of a fair value is, I don't know if you're aware, but Justin Rose is the defending champion of this event. And right now we got Justin Rose at plus 700.
That's not bad. That's not bad. He's plus 700.
Yes.
What book are you looking at?
I'm looking at the combination, so it's got a little bit of everything where they're wrapping it up into. It's just a Vegas Insider.
Okay. No, I was just curious. I'm looking at FanDuel right now, so I wanted to sort of base set that because I've got Rory plus 750 right now at FanDuel, and that's win only.
And well, if we're going with FanDuel, they got Justin Rose at plus 1100.
There you go. There's your value. There's your value, Ross. We're doing
as your defending champion.
We're doing some work here.
You already know he can win there.
We're doing some work here. We just found you a pick. I'm looking up and down this field here. Do you have any thoughts on a guy like Max Homa, who was making a little bit of a run on Sunday or Saturday? Again, I have to correct myself. It's really easy to say Sunday, but Max Homa plus 1,800. You've seen him get hot of late. He's been playing a couple of PGA events. Any thoughts on Homa making a little bit of a run?
Honestly, in this early season swing to the West Coast like they normally do, I do like a lot of the California guys out there. So, a Homa, a Cantlay, a Morikawa, those are all, even a Shoffley. Those are all solid picks, especially considering this is the first real big tournament with a full field. You really can't go wrong with any of those guys. But for the value, I think Justin Rose is the defending champ for how high those odds are. That's worth throwing some money. I mean, he won there last year. So,
hey, there you go. I know these weren't as in depth as Mr. Bushman likes to make them, but I'm trying my best here, Ross. I'm trying to fill this seat. I'll throw one other one out there. Justin Thomas. If we're gonna go further down the board, FanDuel plus 2,800. If you want to make even more money and throw something out there after we leave that area, I think, although we've had so many long shots come up and win these events so far this season, that's sort of my cutoff line in terms of looking at stuff here. I would say, Justin Thomas, probably where I would draw the line in terms of trying to take another long shot. That said, I will make these predictions here right now. And on Sunday, it's going to be somebody below that in terms of odds with something way juicier that winds up surprising all of us. At least that's how it's gone thus far.
I don't know if you're going to get a Justin Thomas outright, but if you were able to spin any kind of deal, a Justin Thomas like a top 5, because since the
I
ever
can
since the
check
Ryder
those odds real quick.
ever since the Ryder Cup and then the FedEx Cup snub, Justin Thomas has basically failed to finish or is basically not failed at finishing outside the top 5 in every event since then.
Plus 550 right now. So it's not as juicy as the outright, but they're definitely looking at him for top 5 here. Those odds are a little bit higher than I would have expected.
Yes. So I think if you're looking to throw down some money on some of the higher ones, maybe throw in a Justin Thomas top 5 and just basically cover yourself on your board in general, because I think that's highly likely that we're going to see JT return in the same fashion in the past several tournaments he's played since reworking himself. He's been a top 5 player in every tournament.
You're making me feel a little bit better about the names I'm throwing out here as we do this. I mean, this is my golf debut, Ross. So I'm flying blind, and you're agreeing. So if I say something stupid, just tell me that's a terrible pick. Don't do that, and we'll go from there.
Tony, I have no room to talk on picks because everything that me and Jack have said this entire week has been nowhere in the ballpark because we've had a long shot underdog win every single week out of nowhere.
There we go. And that's the beauty of golf betting, isn't it?
Yep.
It's fantastic. Anything else that you're looking forward to this weekend in terms of the AT&T Pro-Am? I know this is going to be a little bit different of an event than it has in the past. You sort of prefaced that with me, and I've been looking at this, but the Pro-Am event is actually going to only be 2 days instead of all 4, as I believe it has been in the past. I hear they're going to do a little ceremony on Friday. I haven't seen the list of those in the amateur side. Do you know if you've got have you seen anybody that's in the amateur field yet?
I have not seen the amateur field released for sure, like who is going to be in
real quick.
But we can expect the normal. You're going to get the great Bill Murray is going to be there. The one I don't know if we're going to see it or not. The defending champion for this event for the amateur is Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know if you're going to see him compete based on everything that's happened to him this year.
I think he'll be there. He's got to compete in something, right?
Yeah, I could see him going out and just playing golf for 2 days and trying to keep the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I've got a field list from the Pro-Am, I think. Oh no, this is just the regulars. Sometimes I can grab a field list real quick. They have not yet released the official amateurs for the event yet, but when that does come out, I'll be curious to see if one Aaron Rodgers is competing in this. But it wouldn't surprise me, man. It really wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, he needs something to fill his time, so maybe he'll go defend that title.
Who knows? I have no idea who to pick for that event right now because we don't have a list for it. But if he's on that, I've seen him in the match, watched him golf a couple of times. I think you would stand a good shot. Bill Murray, as you said, will likely be there, but we can't really comment on much at this point because we don't know who's going to be there. I did see a little bit on the LPGA side. They did have their event down in Florida. I believe that was last week. You had Blackhawks legend Jeremy Roenick out there. Brian Baumgartner, also known as Kevin from The Office, was down there. I saw him hit a pin seeker out of a bunker. So if he's playing in this, I know he's got some golf skills. But it'll be interesting to see. It's Florida versus California. I know those guys can get around on some jets real quick, but a lot of those guys like playing closer to home sometimes as well. So it'll be interesting to see who winds up in that. Ross, that's pretty much all I have for AT&T. We've got a bunch of other news to get to. And I know that you drew up this lovely rundown for us before we hopped on here. What's our next topic of discussion?
So just a cool little thing that I think flew under the radar for a lot of people, but just cool to note. The Højgaard twins. Holy shit, dude. Rasmus and Nikolai both finishing second respectively on the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour a day apart. Just awesome, man. I mean, they're literally identical twins. It was cool. I know I was texting you a little bit over the weekend, like, holy shit, Rasmus is solo second in DP right now, and Nikolai's top T2 in the final pairing on Saturday right now. Just absolutely incredible, especially when Nikolai making the jump to the PGA Tour this year. There was a lot of rumor of him potentially going to live, so I think it was positive for him to make the jump and already locked down a solo second in only his third start on PGA Tour.
Hey, that's some weird twin shit, man. I'm always amazed at what twins are able to do. You see them in hockey play on the same line. In golf tournaments, they're finishing in the same positions halfway across the world from each other. Just interesting dynamic there. I mean, that's not the first time two twins have done something completely newsworthy or just weird. I don't know how to describe that, but man, they have to be very proud parents to watch their kids grow up and both compete at that type of level, no matter what sport it is, whether it's golf, hockey, football, baseball. To see both of them sort of excelling at the pinnacles of sport on the same weekend like that has to be a very happy family group chat going on there since Saturday.
I can only imagine that those parents are absolutely exhausted considering the time difference between the two tournaments. I doubt their parents friggin' were able to sleep to watch Nikolai finish up on Saturday. And then as soon as Nikolai finishes up, well, Rasmus is about to go on DP.
I mean, there's worse situations to be in as a parent. I'm sure they had many sleepless nights with two young twins when they were growing up. So maybe they were well prepared for it, not one but two. So just awesome for them. I think that was an excellent, cool note to drop on here, Ross. What else we got next, man?
So one thing that just unfortunate timing for me and Jack, because we spent all last week talking about it. Like the day after we talked about it, Nick Dunlap declared and turned pro. Decided to forego the remainder of his career at Alabama and is now in the field this week. We talked a little bit about it made sense for him to make the jump right now because with his win, he already locked up a card for 2025 and for 2026. But by going now, he essentially gets a third-year card right now. He's in all the signature events, and he's locked himself into all the majors. So it really just it was more of a thing where, you get an extra year of eligibility just by going now. So it made sense.
It did. And, I sort of thought that this was exactly how this was going to go down. I'm not sure about you, but after that win, the press conference afterwards, I was listening to the presser in the media room, and they had asked him, like what's next on your agenda, talking about different things, and at first he said, like I've got to go back to school, I've got to figure this out. And he sort of slipped up a little bit and was like, I got to figure out a way to get to Torrey Pines. And then sort of like backtracked on that a little bit. And then the next morning, you hear him withdraw from the Torrey Pines event. And then you get a press conference sort of midweek where he announces that he's going to go pro. I thought this was sort of just all obvious. This is what he's going to do from the second he had that press conference in the media room when they were asking him. I thought it was awesome for him to, take that week off, go back home, sort of celebrate that victory, talk with people. I'm sure he talked with his academic advisors, talked with, his school teammates, his coach, everybody there. But I think this is an excellent storyline to follow for the PGA Tour this year. And my reasoning behind that is you've seen sort of this mass exodus, not mass, but very prominent names leaving for live. And that's obviously dominated the golf talk world. But for somebody like Nick Dunlap, who's an up and coming star in golf, to declare early, come on to the tour this year, I think you're going to see a lot of headlines from this guy. He's going to command a lot of media availability. He's going to be probably going through some growing pains. I wouldn't expect him to come out this week and, be at the top of the leaderboard. If he is, oh my God, things are just going to accelerate for him so much faster than I think people can even comprehend. But there's going to be a little bit of growing pains. On that same note, though, golf needs young stars more than it ever has right now. And having a guy like him who's already had success on the PGA Tour, he's already very well spoken with the media. I'm not sure if you've watched all the interviews yet, but just he reminds me of like a Connor Bedard with the Blackhawks. Here's this young kid who's coming up and mature beyond his years, knows how to handle himself in these situations already. I know he's done a lot with his collegiate career so far, but what a story this year for golf fans to get excited about when you've got guys like John Rahm. We'll talk about another name that's leaving for live. Golf needed somebody else, or PGA specifically needed somebody else to step in here and be a household name almost for golf fans. And I think Nick Dunlap sort of fits that mold very early on in his career. And that is going to be so beneficial this year for golf. And I love it. I love the decision. I don't know about you. I'll turn it over to you to give me your thoughts on this, but I think that there's nothing but positivity that comes from this story.
Oh yeah, I do believe it was the best decision he could make. And once again, I'm just gonna lean into the fact that you're getting yourself an extra year on tour, dude. It's one thing you were guaranteed all next year and the year after that. This is where you can really, extend your career and get a solid foothold with the bank, everything right now. And the kid just has balls of steel. You could see there's ice in his veins. He's cool, calm, collected. Just the way he carried himself through Amex, everything. Like you said, the press conferences, everything. He's just so well put together. He's way ahead of his time considering he's only 20, that I even went and said in my article, I'm not going to be surprised to see Nick Dunlap go and win another event at some point this summer.
I wouldn't be either. I'm not counting on it coming at AT&T at Pebble Beach and Spyglass, but I could definitely see him taking another event as well, Ross. I think that from what was on display just last week, there's definitely something there. All right, man. What else do we have here? I know that there's some other big news that we've got to talk about.
So just really briefly, the PGA board was announced yesterday. And so basically all that is the players, like accountability board that work with the tour officials, commissioners, and essentially make decisions for the betterment of the game moving forward. Now, the key to this is most of these players' terms do not start until 2024. These people have just been picked as the new members. But really what stood out to me that I want to talk about it is, what we've seen from these like tour accountability boards. You've normally seen like Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, Jordan Spieth, the top of the board guys. what I found interesting is I'm just going to read off a couple of these names. I found that this new step forward with this new PGA trying to go in a new direction. They basically covered all bases and they went through a variety of players at different points and levels in their career. So just a couple of them to name off, like Sam Burns, Nick Hardy, Mackenzie Hughes, Grayson Murray, who just won, Adam Schenk, Kevin Streelman, Justin Thomas, Camilo Villegas.
That's a
You know,
name. Yeah.
It's not just the guys that are at the top of the board every week that are winning, making a good living on the tour. They went and they extended the olive branch out to guys that are grinding week by week, just trying to keep their card. They pick some of those guys and put them on this board so it can be an all around issue addressed and make sure that they're touching the game as a whole. That we're not just leveling the money to the front of the field. Like, let's make sure if a guy makes the cut and gets there, he's being compensated correctly for his effort so he can continue the dream. And I thought that was just the most interesting thing when you looked at that list, is that they did spread it out and they did go through a variety of different types of players and different skill levels, because you do have your PGA Tour winners and major champions in there, but you also now have the guys like even Lanto Griffin, guys that have just been grinding it out on the PGA for years now. And, they're not a household name, but they have fought and worked their asses off to stay on tour this long. Those guys are now being recognized and have a spot at the table.
So again, I prefaced this before we really got into anything. Haven't been watching PGA Tour golf my whole life. I'm fairly new to this. So, I was aware of the player advisory board, but this seems very new to me. So for the new golf fan, how much of a change was this to include names like that, Ross? How important is these non-household names to that advisory board? What do you think the PGA is going to get out of including those voices in the room?
So the best example I can give for this is, now I just said Grayson Murray has been named as a member of that board. I don't know if you remember, but last summer at the RBC, they had the players only meeting where essentially they addressed the live merger and everything. And they laid out like what the new structure and format and how people were going to get paid. And essentially the structure that was offered was just hanging out the low hanging fruit out to dry. And a player stepped up in that meeting and basically called for Jay Monahan to resign right then and there, to which that player was told by Rory McIlroy, his player advocate, just play better. To which this player responded to Rory and told him to fuck off in this meeting. That player was Grayson Murray, who is now on this accountability board.
And Rory is no longer on that board.
No. Rory stepped down following the PGA season.
Yeah,
so as we would expect.
Right. The whole thing is quite intriguing, at least to somebody who's just stepping into this world. But it also lends some concerns from someone just from the outside, and maybe this is a dumb, naive question, but I would assume that there are multiple guys who normally served on this same player advisory board that are now no longer on the PGA Tour. They're elsewhere making a lot more money.
Yes.
That's what I figured. But I think it was a good olive branch, as you mentioned, to include some of these names, because those are the guys who have been loyal to the tour for their career. And haven't made that jump.
And I think it makes sense because, as we'll move on to our next subject in a minute about what's going on with LIV, I think it helps protect the PGA and keep it a little more wholesome, where when you have players like Grayson Murray and Lanto Griffin on this board, realistically, those guys are talented golfers by a PGA standard. You're not going to get those guys, to get LIV's attention. They're just never gonna. And I'm not using that as like a way to shoot these guys down. Just they're not the draw that Liv wants for the people that they're taking. So this is like a security more for the PGA over time, that this guy's going to be around, and it's good to have these type of people on the board because of where their careers are, and that they are lifers. They're at this point, most of them are just trying to hang on and stay competitive as best as they can. So I think it's good that we spread where, yes, we have players like Max Homa and Justin Thomas are on this board, but to also cover bases, we're also keeping PGA lifers, people that there is no chance they are really ever going to a rival tour of any sort.
Yeah, it's an interesting move, and we'll have to see what comes of it throughout the year. But I found that interesting. It's just definitely something that was when you see a player advisory board, typically within any league, it generally has some of the biggest names within the sport. Obviously, mix it up a little bit, but I feel like they were catering this one a little bit more towards guys who, as you said, aren't exactly the draw names, but they're the guys who are going to be in a ton of these fields. They're not guys that are jetting off to Dubai and playing the first couple events on the DP World Tour. They're PGA guys.
I was gonna say some of the guys that are on this board are trying to figure out if they can get a jet to next week's tournament, let alone can they get to another country right now. So I think that's a solid foundation to have moving forward, because you are, encompassing all aspects of the tour itself. Players at all ends will have an opinion and be able to speak out on changes and things that are made moving forward, as fingers crossed we approach a new deal.
It impacts them almost more than your big names. So I think that's important. I thought that was a good move. Ross, let's get to the big one here. Let's do it.
So the big one that you and I woke up this morning and both shot each other a text right away that, well, there's another topic we got to add to the list. Yesterday, Tyrrell Hatton announced that he was going to play this week's AT&T at Pebble Beach. And then we woke up this morning to find out that he took $50 million or $60 million, and now he's part of Liv.
Did you see this one coming?
He's been rumored there for a very long time.
There's been a lot of guys, though, that have been rumored for a very long time to be making this jump. I mean, let's think about his draw, right? He's the golfer's golfer, right? He's out there swearing up and down. He's not a John Daly by any stretch of the imagination, but he's somebody that commands the camera when he's out on the golf course. Yes. It's the best way I can put it. The camera's going to be around him. They're going to interview him, whether he has the worst round of his life or the best round of his life. And just a couple weeks ago, I believe he had one of the greatest rounds of his life and still was unhappy with it. He's a media guy. I was not surprised by this, because that's exactly what Liv Golf wants. It's sort of the death knell to the PGA, right? It's, hey, we're going to command all of the guys that we can put on television, because they're out there trying to secure more airtime everywhere they go. So he made a lot of sense to me to be a target. I think it was $63 million. That's life-changing money. I think you gave me a figure. What did he make? 28 on the PGA Tour in his time there?
He's made a little over $28 million in 5 years on the PGA Tour, which one thing that was speculated when he was first rumored to be going a few weeks ago is that they approached him with an offer, and it wasn't much of a difference maker for him. Like, realistically, he probably could make about that much over the next 5 years on tour. Just the scrutiny and everything of going to Liv wasn't enough of a draw. And then, Liv's season starts this week, and as of this morning, they didn't have a complete roster. They still had open spots. So it looks like this was a late night business call telling him, here's your new number. And, You know, with only making 28 million over 5 years on tour, they gave him 60 million to come right now. So they essentially, you know, went and basically doubled his career earnings overnight for him to come play. At that point, it makes sense. And like you said, he is one of those drawing players where, especially if you're a new golf fan, he is one of the favorites. He is fun to watch, that he's just self-ridiculing every single shot, swearing at himself, that he basically did exactly what he wanted to, but he didn't do it good enough. And so, you know, he's an effing piece of shit. That I hit it to 8 feet, not 5.
It's definitely, you know, I've played enough rounds of golf with, you know, other people here, even at On Tap Sports, that it's it kind of reminds me of Ron Luce out there on the golf course. You know, he's going to get upset at a shot here or there, and there's going to be a reaction, and you know, there you go. That's what you want, though. You want some viral moments that are going to hit the internets, and people can talk about him. That's marketable, and he's a marketable guy. So I'm just curious if you've seen any further details on this. I haven't dug into it too far yet, but is there a term on this? 60 million up front? Is it over 5 years? I'm really curious how this breaks down.
I have not seen details yet of like what the term is. I know their main thing is they just wanted to get him signed and get him on so he can complete John Rahm's team, so they can all tee off this weekend for the first live event in Mayakoba.
There you go. I'm really curious to see what some of the terms are on these deals, and what happens when a guy's live contract expires if somebody tries to make the reverse jump back over to PGA. Again, all pending if there's an actual merger and players can, you know, are free to, you know, go back and forth between these things. But I'm waiting for that first guy and see how that goes, because it's going to be a very life-changing moment in terms of the golf landscape at this juncture. But you know, if it's a 2-year 60 million versus, you know, 6-year 60 million, that's a huge difference in terms of how long you're locked up. 10 million AAV is a lot different than 30 million. So it's a lot of these things aren't disclosed. I'm very interested in that. Just, you know, baseball contract, football contract. How long are these guys locked up for? I don't think a lot of that has been made public.
Yeah, a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it, they just throw us figures and they tell us how, you know, how much someone got bought for. Where regular guys like you and me sitting here go, well, fuck yeah, I would go do that too if they offered me that. Like, yeah,
right. But is it a lifetime deal? Is it a 2-year deal? Some of that stuff has to come into play. I'm surprised that, and again, it's if Live Golf doesn't want to disclose that, they don't have to. There's really no governing body telling them that they need to do so. But I'm very curious to know, like, what exactly are they signing for? Because that could totally change the trajectory of what's really going on here. That's just my thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's one thing that gets lost in all this, is that we just tend to get told and reported numbers and figures. We don't actually see, like, you know, how is that extrapolated over the next several seasons, though?
Right.
You know, is he getting cut a $60 million check right now, all up front, and then make it work for the next 5 years? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's really changes the whole, you know, landscape of what's going on here, because hey, 60 million up front, how long is he playing for? I'm sure there's other cash prizes that come along with some of these tournaments as well. Are these just signing bonuses versus, you know, here's what your salary is? Because some of these guys can go and, you know, depending on the purse sizes, signature events, what's going on with PGA, I know they're trying to stay competitive in this market. They have to. They don't have a choice, or they'd lose everyone. But it really does matter. And I think at some point we'll start to get some of those bits and details of what's going on here. It's just not going to be anytime soon.
Well, that's what actually that statement you just gave is perfect because it will actually ties this current subject with the last subject, and the one we're about to talk about is that player accountability board was designed because the PGA's initial plan to compete with Live was obviously making the purses higher for the winners.
Right.
But what that involved was the guys at the bottom that, I finished 79th, but I made the cut. I'm getting less money because the guy at the top is getting more. That's where this accountability board came into that. Why the hell do I get punished? I still made the cut. I have bills and stuff that keep me alive and my career alive. You can't tell me because I made the cut, I still make less money. And now it turns into Live buying off all these players, which brings us to our final subject that happened relatively quickly before you and I jumped on, that it looks like the PGA is about to close a deal with the sports consortium, including Fenway Sports Group, led with a large investment by Steve Cohen, rumored to be putting in about $3 billion directly into the tour.
Holy cash. That's something. And this was a name I asked you before we hopped on here because we both saw this news just a little bit before we hit the go live button. But I didn't see his name anywhere around any of these deals at all until this afternoon.
Yeah, that's the same thing. I know you and I have been texting off camera about it for a few weeks now that we initially kind of saw this. I would say probably mid-December around Christmas, it was shown that this was kind of coming to fruition. And the only names we really saw were like Arthur Blank from the Atlanta Falcons. And we knew like John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group those are the two main parties basically leading this forward, trying to cut a deal to, funnel some money directly into PGA right away. And then out of nowhere, it drops that it looks like it's going to happen. It looks like it's going to happen soon. And it's going to be Uncle Stevie from the clouds dropping $3 billion.
Yeah. And I mean, he's no stranger to doing that. I mean, this is from the New York Post. I'll just read a little snippet of it off real quick, Ross. PGA Tour is close to closing in on a $3 billion investment that may not include rival Live Golf. Strategic Sports Group led by Fenway Sports Group, including Mets owner Steve Cohen's Cohen Private Ventures, along with Atlanta Falcons owner Arthur Blank and former Milwaukee Bucks co-owner Mark Lazary, is set to make a historic investment, and this is all according to Bloomberg, with some additional money coming in from the PIF. It could set a new valuation of the newly created for-profit PGA Tour Enterprises at around $12 billion. That's a pretty hefty valuation. There's obviously some cash here. You talked just a little bit about the higher purses and everything. There's been some sponsorship issues with the PGA thus far that have already been reported. You've got, Wells Fargo pulling out. I believe Farmers is also reportedly pulling out on their event as well. So they're going to need a lot of cash to back some of these events. I would imagine for corporate sponsors, if you can lessen what their monetary investment needs to be by just a little bit with some private equity investments, that it will lessen that burden. And you might get, maybe you've got to put up 30, 70%, depending on who you're dealing with. But that should save some of these events and save some money out of their pockets. The interesting part that I got out of this, Live Golf chairman was reportedly unhappy with the involvement of private equity money since it felt like Live Golf was no longer at the center of the talks, according to CBS Sports. They've got to be fuming at this juncture because we've already talked about them stealing, top talent. Just talked about Hatton moving over, what they're trying to do. I don't know where you stand in terms of Live versus PGA or how anybody who listens to the show feels. I'm just giving my raw, unfiltered opinions. They came in when they started this league. They wanted to be the center of golf. They still want to be the center of golf. And when PGA goes out and gets an angel investor, basically, which is what's happening here with Steve Cohen, a lot of negotiating and a lot of leverage just vanished in a single afternoon. At least that's what it looks like to me. I think that's great for the PGA. I think that's phenomenal. On the other end, there's other people out there who some are fans of Steve Cohen, others are not. But the fact that it's facing some criticism still due to some PIF involvement and PIF being so tied in with Liv, this is one of the most intriguing deals, in my opinion, in probably the last century of sports league investment money that's coming in. So there's going to be a lot written about this over the next few days. There's going to be a lot talked about this over the next few days. It'll be interesting to see what transpires before we get to Thursday when the AT&T Pro-Am kicks off, because I'm sure it's going to be a huge topic in media circles. I'm looking at the media availability here, and they've got a pending interview with Rory. I can't wait to see what he has to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is I don't think PIF is out of this by any means. The only thing I think this does is it drives the price up on PIF of what the PGA is going to request in donation. Realistically, I think they were looking to get about $7 billion in funding put into the tour. I think it's going to be a 7 flat ask out of PIF for them. But I think it is going to come with, if they're willing to come and make that deal, they will get a big part of a seat at the table. But I think that this essentially drove the number up for trying to give the PGA leverage. I will say the only thing that concerns me is with PIF's money, with Liv, they have unlimited funds. The money just is a non-existent thing to them for how much money they have. That this buys the PGA Tour time. This does not rectify and solve every single problem, but this buys time for us to. I mean, ideally, we still want to get it done by the Masters. We just want to put it to bed. What's this new for-profit entity look like? But it does help the players with security. Maybe you get a few less players looking at making that jump, but it doesn't fix everything right now. But I am sure it probably just pissed the Saudis off for sure, that they realize they're not going to have as big of a seat at the table as they initially thought they were going to, because there's a third entity involved in this now. But
and we'll see though, Ross. I mean, Steve Cohen, that's a big name. Who else potentially could jump in and eat a little bit? We didn't have him on our radar 24 hours ago. Steve Cohen's got a large Rolodex of phone numbers. I'm sure if PIF wants to play a little hardball, you've got a big player at the table now in terms of all of this. That could change very quickly with a couple of phone calls. I'm sure that if Tyrell Hatton was doing late night business calls, Steve Cohen knows how to make late night business calls as well. So I'm just throwing out devil's advocate here. You bring in names like this, things can get very interesting very fast.
Oh, definitely. I think the biggest thing that this is going to help solve, though, is going to be the sponsorship. Because I don't know how familiar you are where these new ridiculous purses for the PGA are coming from. They are borrowing against future assets. The reason that you're having Farmers and Wells Fargo and stuff pull out is because they're already sponsoring the events for the next 2 to 3 years. It's when they get their asking price for 2027, they're going, there's no freaking way I'm paying that, because the price went up, that they're betting against future funds and they need to continue these future funds. That's why you're seeing all these sponsors that have been around basically our entire lifetime growing up. These events are going to change their names and sponsorships because they're borrowing funds too far in the future. The asking price is going up 73% on some of these tournaments, to where the company that sponsored it for the last 30 years goes, yeah, we're out.
Yeah, it's a very precarious spot to be in for some of these companies. I believe I wrote up the one on Farmers over at OnTap Sportsnet. when they made their announcement that they were pulling out, and the prices on these things are going up in the near range of 73%. That's a lot to swallow, to have your corporate name on a golf event. It's not required business for them. A lot of this is marketing expense. So
What Wells
what are you
Fargo,
doing with it, right? Like, you're an executive at X company, not X company, that could be, construed as Elon Musk, but you're at B company, right? And you're asked to now, foot up 20, 30 more $1 million than what you were expecting to, for your deal that you had in place for years upon years. And that's not just inflation money. That's we need to, as a PGA is asking you, we need to compete, and here's our set prices. Yeah, I mean, it's already ugly out there in the U.S. economy. There's you're making layoffs, and yet you're investing this type of money into golf. It's very hard to go back to your shareholders and tell them, hey, this is what we're going to continue to do. So I understand where that comes from, but for all intents and purposes, you want PGA in a spot where they don't need to go up against the entity that is Live Golf with PIF Saudi money that just backs it, almost with a cash machine that just sits there and prints. So I was intrigued by the Steve Cohen involvement here.
Yeah, I mean, having Steve Cohen in is going to turn some things around and definitely make a difference. It's just the fact that, Steve Cohen putting $3 billion in the tournament when PIF is sitting over there with $640 billion in the bank account. It's play money. It's fake money for them. Essentially they could come buy up every single PGA Tour player out of spite if they wanted to, and they won't even make a dent in that bank account.
They haven't yet. That's the important thing.
Yes.
They haven't yet, and that's the important. Yeah, well, yet. I'm just going to leave it on that note and maybe, finish this beer here. Ross, this has been fantastic getting to sit here and talk about something other than White Sox baseball or Blackhawks hockey. It's been a very rough year in my podcast career. So getting to talk a little, some PGA golf, little private equity, and all this other stuff that goes along with golf is normally out of my depth, out of my radar on what I normally talk about on a podcast. But this has been a ton of fun. I hope I made Jack Bushman proud on this episode. That was my goal. But I'd love to do this again sometime, at least, once or twice more this summer, hopefully, maybe more. We'll see what comes of it. But this has been incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been so much fun just to have some beers, talk golf. But Tony, do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts? I mean, golf is great. I've re-fallen in love, I should say, with this sport over the last couple of years. I'm really, really excited about what we're doing here at Golf on Tap. It's been a really interesting year. We've launched this show. Some news, final thoughts. This is now going to be available in podcast form going forward on both Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're officially in there. So you can find this show wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's either of those platforms. More to come soon as it distributes out there. But these are going to start to get loaded up on podcast format, as well as on our YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet, youtube.com/OnTapSportsnet. Really excited about that. We got out last year to not one, but two events as credentialed reporters. I can't wait to get you out there as well to one of them this summer, hopefully. Just the amount of golf content that I've consumed over the last year has increased over 10,000%. Don't plan on stopping. It's been incredible. I know I entered this whole entire thing at a really weird time with all the live golf and PIF, and there's money flying around back and forth, but it's an exciting time. I'm really happy to be on here doing this with you. I'm glad that you are part of the team. Jack Bushman's part of the team. Joey Ricotta's still out there giving some bets as well. I'm sure you'll hear him on these airwaves. I have so much planned for this Golf on Tap show, Ross. I know you and I text about it all the time. Just very exciting times around here at On Tap Golf. So thank you for letting me come on. I appreciate it so much. And I hope that everybody who tunes in and listens to the show, whether it was live in podcast form, enjoyed having me on these airwaves. Can't wait to come back. But next week, I'll pass the torch back over to Jack, and you guys can handle it going forward. Just hopefully we have an exciting week of PGA golf out there, Pebble Beach, Spyglass Hill. Can't wait to watch the best tear it up on those courses this weekend. Should be super fun. Can't wait to get to Thursday, man. Thanks again for having me on.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Tony. We really do appreciate it, and we'll definitely have you back on soon. Everyone else, have a good evening. This has been Golf on Tap.